I have 10 graphic design trends I think you should consider for 2026. The team and I have spent the last several weeks scouring design blogs, Pinterest feeds, and a lot more to come up with a core 10 design styles we have seen trending upwards. And maybe you've seen some stuff that looks like what we're about to talk about, but that's why it's called a trend, okay? It comes, it goes, it usually comes back in a different way than you remember it, and I guarantee there are at least 4 on this list you have not considered. Not to mention there are 3 honorable mention styles that we're cooking on the back burner. We're going to talk about those later. And hey, if you're new to the channel, my name is Drew. I run the production team here at Kittl with the pleasure of bringing you educational content just like this. So if you fancy that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, subscribe to the channel here, and down in the description, you're going to find a ton of helpful links, including articles, templates, and the full trend report that we wrote about everything in this video. Oh, and feel free to use the timestamps down below to jump right to whatever trend you want to see. All right, let's kick things off with Naïve Design, or what you might call childish design, which has a super raw charm of children's visual drawings and scribbles, and it takes those naive concepts and combines them into professional design contexts. Instead of striving for a polished graphic, this style embraces imperfection. So like I said, there are things like doodles, shaky handwriting, uneven shapes, anything to capture a spontaneity or even maybe humor or something a lot more vulnerable. It's almost like taking those scribbles from the margins of your school notebook and then putting them into a proper brand identity. And it really works because it connects you a lot faster and a lot easier to emotion rather than a technical perfection. And what makes this design so compelling is how it challenges your expectations. It's not really about just using a kid's drawing, although you are. It's about using the qualities of a childlike drawing for naivety and play. So here are some visual characteristics to keep in mind for Naïve Design. Uneven handwriting is a major deal here. It can look like it was made in pen or marker or even in crayon. Simple or naive doodles are also important. Even something like a stick figure could pass with this style. And rough analog textures are a big part of this trend. So don't be afraid to get some pencil and paper and start drawing. And imperfections, again, are welcome, like messed up proportions for characters or maybe letters that are not necessarily in proper alignment. Our next style is what we're calling Trinket Design, which you can also feel free to call or search as collection, catalog, or index design. Now, this is where objects, images, or artifacts are going to be presented as if they are specimens that go together in sort of an archive. So generally, the objects are flattened, sometimes they're even numbered, and they're organized with kind of an index style. But it doesn't have to be so scientific because the trend is really about the act of collecting as the design itself. I've been seeing a lot of people do this with cutouts of things from their childhood. For example, Graham did a video on the channel about Trinket Design, making a poster of things that both of us remember from growing up. It was a lot more nostalgic, it was a lot more playful and colorful. Now, on the other hand, I've also seen people cataloging things like glassware or keys or vegetables or anything else, and it still has that similar layout vibe. So you want to try searching all of those kinds of terms on sites like Pinterest, or you can use our trend report along with the templates we created to get a good idea for this visual language. Now, here are some visual characteristics of Trinket Design. You're going to have cutout objects, which are super key, and they are isolated from their original context. They're often going to be placed on flat backgrounds. You're going to have index grids or a floating layout, which can both be used, and you're going to have objects arranged symmetrically, sometimes maybe even numbered or labeled, but sometimes they are just floating around. You're also going to have equal weighting. The objects are often shown side by side as the same size, even though in real life something is clearly smaller or bigger than the other thing. Okay, now we're going to talk about a mega trend, and that is grainy blur design. I know, stay with me, okay? Grain and blur and gradients have all been around for a long time. I got you. But there are 4 sub-trends that are really interesting, and they're popping up a lot more often. So let's go ahead and buckle in because they're all a little bit distinct from each other. And if you get tired of it, just use the timestamps down below to jump to the next one. The first sub-trend is gradient layouts. Now here, the gradients aren't just for background or for decoration. They actually play into the layout itself. So designers use these big gradient fields as dividers or for sections and structural blocks that help organize the content and typography. You're going to have these grainy transitions with lots of breathing room, text that floats over soft color, and it feels kind of minimal but somehow nostalgic. I've been seeing this a lot in editorial design, poster design, and even on home pages for web design. So keep these visual characteristics in mind when you're trying to do a gradient layout. So you're going to have fades splitting layouts vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. You're going to have grainy, hazy transitions with vector smooth looking blends, and you're going to have them paired generally with clean serif or grotesque typography with palettes like a sunset orange, maybe blue, even neon pink, and sometimes purple. The second sub-trend is using fuzzy amorphous creatures. This was completely new to me. I know it seems a little bit weird, but this sub-trend turns gradients into actual characters. They are very strange, soft creatures that feel half plush, half psychedelic, and the grainy spray paint texture makes them feel tactile and alive. So you might see them with googly eyes, a squiggly smile. They're kind of cute, they're a little uncanny, and they are ideal for playful but surreal type designs. So here are some visual characteristics for fuzzy gradient creatures. You're gonna have spray painted airbrushed textures with very blurry edges. You're gonna have simple cartoon faces with wide aisles and minimal smiles, and you're gonna have blobby or star-like silhouettes and candy colored neon rainbow gradients. The third subtrend is acid blur, and now acid blur is the most raw and versatile of all of these. It's hazy, grainy, and the gradients carry a spray painted or design-like energy. Unlike a super polished gradient design, this blurry style looks more tactile, imperfect, and handmade. It can shift from dreamy pastels to really harsh neons as well, but the fuzzy or hazy edges are always there with some diffused color. So we're seeing this a lot on poster designs, even t-shirt graphics, and if you want to know how some of these designs are being layered and created, make sure you check out some of those templates in the description, which we created for this style specifically. So the key characteristics for this style are grainy speckled edges that kind of make this atmosphere around the object. You can have spray painted or soft brushed textures, and you're going to have versatile color use like muted pastels or highly saturated neons. Next up is blurry or ethereal florals. Now, blurry florals we've talked about before. They have a soft and natural motif that give you more a dreamy, washy kind of color style. And instead of using a crisp, realistic petal illustration, the flowers dissolve into this pastel gradient that feels more atmospheric. So the focus here is more on mood than detail, and it makes them a great choice for everything from editorial design to posters to book covers to even social graphics. So keep these visual characteristics in mind. You're gonna have grainy or speckled edges that feel super atmospheric. You're gonna have a very dreamy or glowy mood to whatever you're creating, and you're gonna have versatile colors like muted pastels, or again, like we said before, saturated neons. All right, our next official design trend, so we're back to the main top 10, is called type collage. Now, this is where typography doesn't just support the design, it really is the design. So instead of a clean grid and a really careful hierarchy, you're gonna have mutated type that overlaps in a collage, kind of still legible but illegible style. So the words are dominating the design here, and they're often stretched, warped, cut, or layered in a way that feels very noisy. Okay, so it has roots in cut and paste zine culture where type was photocopied and then distorted and then rearranged and cut into a raw composition. But in the digital times like we're in right now, it's kind of been elevated into a more contemporary, eye-grabbing graphic style. So you might see this style in fashion campaigns or a music festival poster or even streetwear branding, or maybe even something in like a sportswear campaign where the vibe and emotion is more important than being able to read something perfectly. So again, the text is important here because it becomes the texture, becomes the rhythm, the attitude, and something that really overwhelms the page or the design with a lot of energy. So here are some visual characteristics of type collage design. You're going to have overlapping, oversized typography that really dominates the entire composition. You're going to have distorted, stretched, and cut apart letter forms. You're going to have chaotic lettering, so you might have scribbles, might have brush marks or textures, and you're going to have high contrasting color palettes, often with very bold neons. All right, punk grunge design or grunge revival, well, revives the messy DIY energy of the 1990s. This is when Xerox flyers, skate zines, and alternative rock album covers really defined the aesthetic. It feels more raw and deliberately unpolished, so it's like a response to the clean, and minimal look to many current digital designs. So we're going to have more cut and paste collages, more jagged photocopy textures, more chaotic typography, and this style is going to continue to thrive, in my opinion, because it communicates urgency and defiance. Designers can use it to channel countercultural design, whether that's in streetwear graphics, editorial spreads, or music, sports, visuals, anything where you feel like more of an analog approach feels more appropriate. All right, so here's some visual characteristics for punk grunge design. Photocopy textures are big, collage layouts and visible cutouts are super big. You're gonna have graffiti scribbles, messy handwriting, DIY marks. You're gonna have distorted sans serifs, maybe stencils or stretched lettering. And a lot of times you're gonna have white or grayscale palettes with an occasional pop of neon or something very vibrant. Okay, real quick, we're halfway through and I want you to think about a design style that you'd like to see trending in 2026. Now go comment it down below because I want to check that out and consider making some templates for it if we haven't already done that in Kittl. And while you're down there, it would mean a ton if you could hit the subscribe button. That truly helps us out, and that way you don't miss any new videos just like this one coming out. All right, next is signal graphic design, which similarly to our last trend is very chaotic and high energy, and it's pulled straight from MTV's late 80s and 90s golden era of experimental motion design. I'm sure you're going to recognize a few of these playing on the screen, and if not, then I am really getting old. Dang. Unlike the punk designs that have a rough photocopy edge, this signal trend is hyper-saturated, cartoonish, and it has loud type and loud color. So you're going to think about exploding logos, surreal transitions, and clunky 3D objects in an era where television branding went through a ton of experimentation. Today's revival of signal graphics is about embracing fun, randomness, anti-seriousness, and a reminder that design doesn't always have to be super tidy or super minimal. It's a perfect fit for projects that want to feel nostalgic, but still chaotic with some pop culture energy. Here are some visual characteristics to keep in mind for signal graphics. Think about exploding, morphing logos that are animated with wild styles. Cartoon doodles, graffiti marks, squiggles, clunky early 3D graphics, orbs, tubes, abstract shapes, and then you're gonna have bright neon, bold primaries, and electric color palettes. Next is one of my personal favorites on the list, and that is blueprint design, which takes the visual language of technical schematics or patents and architectural plans and repurposes it as a graphic design style. You can also search for this, by the way, by using something like patent design or schematic design when you're browsing on Pinterest. And instead of sleek branding or polished layouts, this trend leans on the detailed line drawings, grids, annotations that look like they've been pulled straight from an engineer's drafting table. And this is going to be including everyday objects from things like cameras or sandwiches or coffee carafes, and they get broken down into precise diagrams that mix function and style. So I've been seeing this pop up a ton in coffee shops and boutiques and bookstores and more niche digital shops like an Etsy store. So think about this trend if you're in the selling space of design, or maybe save this for a reference where a design project could take on more of a schematic approach. All right, here are some visual characteristics of blueprint design to remember. You're gonna have detailed line drawings and schematics of various objects. You're gonna use annotations, numbers, and labels for different parts and steps. And you're gonna have a strong grid system resembling drafting paper, and you're gonna use that classic blueprint blue, monochrome black, or cream parchment textures. Remember to use technical typography like monospaced fonts, or handwriting like labels or stamped lettering. All right, next is distorted portrait design, which takes the human face and body and deliberately warps, stretches, or exaggerates it into something surreal, funny, or just really uncanny. Instead of aiming for beauty here, or for realism for that matter, this trend thrives on weirdness. You're gonna have oversized heads, stretched limbs, and playful caricatures that feel like a hybrid of collage, cartoon, and sort of a digital filter. It pulls influence from the late 90s collage magazines, caricature art, and today's AR filters on apps like an Instagram or TikTok or a Snapchat. But rather than like a gimmicky distortion, it's still pretty polished for this style, so you're going to see it in fashion spreads, posters, album covers, a lot of social media graphics, and the distorted portraiture really interrupts your expectation of beauty, and it feels a little bit humorous but still super memorable. So keep these visual characteristics in mind. You're going to have enlarged or warped features. Okay, so think heads, ears, limbs, hands, feet. You're going to have cartoonish exaggeration that feels like a caricature. You're going to have collage-like cropping or layered into like a surreal backdrop. And of course, you're going to use your bold, vibrant colors for contrast. Now, we actually have a lot of ready-made assets in Kittl for this style, this distorted effect, and we also have some prompting guides in some of our templates if you wanted to take your own photo and then apply these effects to it. And if that interests you, you can give it a try. Another one of my favorites on the list is future medieval design, which was bound to happen at some point. I mean, I felt it coming. This style fuses sacred, archaic visuals from the Middle Ages with modern and futuristic aesthetics. So you're going to think black letter type, illuminated borders, mythic beasts, and relics, but you're going to have them reimagined with digital textures and a lot of distressing and maybe even AI-inspired patterns. It's weird because it feels like looking backward to mysticism and folklore as a way to imagine the future, which somehow ends up looking pretty cool. Designers are layering medieval iconography into modern contexts, creating visuals that feel ceremonial or apocalyptic or a visionary all at once. And a subset of this style, in my opinion, I think is called neoclassical design, which I did a video on a while back. And it isn't like exactly the Middle Ages, but it still takes the neoclassical art and binds it into like a Y2-esque layout. So that might be another one for you to check out if you're interested in this design overall. Okay, here are some visual characteristics to remember for future medieval design. Black letter type, runes, distorted and medieval calligraphy. You're going to have things like dragons and knights, maybe relics and sacred ornaments. You're going to have symmetrical ornate compositions with illuminated borders. You're going to have distressed parchment, halftone textures, or even including organic AI patterns. Now, the last trend on our report is surveillance design, which gives you a raw, functional visual of control systems. And I mean, it's basically exactly what it sounds like. CCTV overlays, biometric scans, and infrared palettes. It's not about beauty here. It's about visualizing exposure, vulnerability, all through an aesthetic of like a machine vision. So you're going to think about timestamps, grids, distorted imagery, and focal points in this style. And by borrowing from visual identity systems of thermal scans and X-rays and machine-readable interfaces, designers can create graphics that maybe feel unsettling on purpose, or maybe they feel a little futuristic. So here are some key visuals for surveillance design. Biometric overlays with face maps, grids, and recognition boxes. You're going to have things like thermal, infrared, night vision, high contrast palettes, X-ray scans of bodies or bags or objects, time-stamped data grids and readable machine text, pixelated low-res distortions that mimic machine vision. All right, now I mentioned that we have 3 honorable mentions, or maybe more accurately, 3 rising design trends that didn't quite make as big of an impact as the top 10, but I think they're still worth considering for future projects. So let's go through them briefly. First up is kidcore design, which is all about reviving the explosive graphic energy of 90s toy culture. So you're gonna think Tamagotchis, Polly Pocket, Digimon, Game Boy cartridges, sticker packs. It's all loud, cartoonish, starburst backgrounds, bubblegum mascots, and neon palettes that scream nostalgic. Kidcore sits between nostalgic and character-driven designs. It's a style that's coming back into editorial spreads, toy-inspired branding, and even streetwear collabs, bringing a childlike joy into adult design contexts. And the mashup of mascots and glassy packaging textures and chaotic layouts makes it playful and slightly overwhelming, but in a really good way. Here are some key visual characteristics for kidcore design. You're going to use starbursts, neon gradients, comic-style explosions, bubble fonts, glossy effects, thick outlines, toy packaging vibes, mascot icons. You're going to use things like creatures or pets or cartoon characters, and you're going to have like a plastic shine, chrome foil, and a sticker-like graphic for your elements. Okay, next is AI abstract art, which leans into the weirdness of machine-made images instead of making something super smooth and hyper-realistic. So rather than chasing the realism or like a corporate perfect render, designers are highlighting the surreal, glitchy, weird qualities that AI somehow naturally produces, and the result is work that feels experimental and somehow alive. It's like closer to an abstract painting than a polished, realistic 3D image. And what makes this trend compelling is the imperfection. You're gonna have a warped anatomy and tangled forms and painterly textures that really become the point of this. It creates visuals that look a little bit alien and handcrafted at the same time. So think about these visual characteristics when going for AI abstract art. You're gonna have painterly textured surfaces instead of clean realism. You're gonna have abstract forms, so morphing, tangled anatomy, maybe fluid shapes. You're gonna have glitches, warped proportions, odd symmetries, and often unresolved artifacts. Lastly, Frutiger Aero is this glossy, futuristic aesthetic that dominated corporate and consumer designs from the early 2000s and 2010s. We actually did a video on this style a while ago. If you want to go do a deep dive on this one, you're going to think Windows Vista, Office 2007, Nokia ads. These are all filled with glassy buttons, semi-transparent menus, and shiny 3D icons. What set this apart was the blend of futurism with organic stuff. So leaves, water splashes, butterflies, blue skies, everything is super blue in this, by the way. And it was a moment in the 2000s when technology and nature were imagined as coexisting, like dolphins and laptops, and green leaves with floating bubbles in a hyper-utopian landscape. This style was everywhere, and I think it's starting to come back in, honestly, like just for the meme of it, but there are some more orderly versions of this style popping up. And your key visual characteristics for Frutiger Aero are going to be glassy, glossy buttons, bubbles, semi-transparent UI layers, a fusion of nature and text. So you're going to have things like skies, water, plants alongside your electronics. You're gonna have aqua blues and greens with bright gradients and super white highlights and other things like that that combine electric and organic. Okay, I have to know, did any of these styles I talked about make it on your trends list for 2026? Were you surprised by any of them? Or maybe you saw something you can't believe is a trend? I want you to comment all of that down below because I would love to know what you think. And you'll want to check out the full trend report we put together, which we linked down in the description, including all of those amazing templates our team has worked on to go hand in hand with these trends we talked about. And we'll also be doing individual videos for each of these styles, so be looking for those tutorials moving forward. Again, I know trends come and go, and maybe this video will become obsolete in another 7 months, but I hope at least you have lots of references and key terms you can use to find these styles a lot easier than you did before. And I truly hope you give Kittl a try. Even if you don't want to use the templates we have a ton of amazing features, including AI powered tools like Nano Banana, for you to go create some super awesome stuff. Anyway, I gotta run before a new design trend pops up, and then I have to do this video again. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.